Dr. Zyx'norp prided himself on being unflappable. After all, when you've spent the better part of a century as the chief xenobiologist at the Galactic Central Hospital, you've pretty much seen it all. Or so he thought, right up until the moment a human stumbled into his emergency room, casually holding their own severed arm, and asked, "Hey, you guys do reattachments here, right?" The gelatinous Blorbian nurse beside him promptly fainted, her amorphous body splashing onto the pristine floor with a wet plop. Zyx'norp's 4 eyes blinked in rapid succession, his antennae twitching in what could only be described as utter disbelief. "Great," the human muttered, rolling their eyes. "I ask for a hand, and instead I get cold feet." Or, well, no feet at all in her case. They glanced down at the puddle of unconscious nurse. "Hey, Doc, your friend there, okay? She looks a little dissolved." Zyx'norp's mandibles clicked furiously as he tried to form a coherent thought. How are you still conscious?" he finally managed to sputter. The human shrugged, then winced as the motion jostled their detached limb. It's just a flesh wound. I've had worse paper cuts." They paused, frowning. "Well, okay, maybe not worse, but definitely more annoying. Have you ever gotten a paper cut right on the knuckle? Absolute nightmare, I tell you." At this point, Zyx'norp's brain finally caught up with the situation. He lunged forward, all 6 of his arms outstretched to support the human. "Quick, we need to get you to surgery immediately. You're losing blood at an alarming rate." The human glanced down at the small puddle of red forming beneath them. "Oh, that? Nah, it's fine. I've got plenty more where that came from. Now about this arm." Zyx'norp was already ushering the human towards the nearest operating theater, shouting orders at the staff in a mixture of standard Galactic and his native click speech. "Prepare for immediate xenosurgery, Class 5 Deathworlder trauma, and someone please reconstitute Nurse Blorb." As they burst through the doors of the operating room, a team of multi-species medical professionals scrambled to prepare for the incoming emergency. The human, meanwhile, seemed more interested in the decor. "Nice place you got here," they commented, eyeing the array of bizarre instruments and pulsating organ-like machines. "Very Alien meets Grey's Anatomy. Love what you've done with the lighting. Really brings out the we're all going to die ambience." Dr. Zyx'norp ignored the commentary, focusing instead on getting the human onto the operating table. "Now please lie down and try to remain calm. We'll do everything in our power to save you." The human complied, but not without adding, "Save me." From what? A lifetime of lopsided hugs. As the medical team swarmed around the table, Zyx'norp began barking out orders. "We need to stop the bleeding immediately. Prepare the coagulation ray." A spindly arachnoid nurse skittered forward, wielding what looked like a cross between a flashlight and a small cannon. The human eyed it warily. "Oh there, Shelob. What's that supposed to do? Turn me into a human popsicle?" The nurse chittered nervously, multiple eyes darting between the human and Dr. Zyx'norp. The doctor, for his part, was busy examining the severed arm with a combination of horror and fascination. "This is unprecedented," he muttered. "The cellular degradation is minimal. It's as if the arm doesn't realize it's no longer attached." The human piped up, "Yeah, it's a bit slow on the uptake. Must have gotten that from my ex." Zyx'norp's antennae twitched in confusion. "Your ex?" "Ex arm," the human clarified with a grin. "Get it? Because it's no longer attached? Eh? Eh?" The entire medical team groaned in unison, a symphony of exasperation that transcended species barriers. "Tough crowd," the human muttered. "I'd give my right arm for a better audience." "Oh, wait." Dr. Zyx'norp shook his head, trying to refocus on the task at hand. "We need to begin the reattachment process immediately. Nurse KZZZ, prepare the neural connector." A being that looked like a sentient cloud of static electricity floated forward, tendrils of energy crackling around what appeared to be a futuristic soldering iron. The human's eyes widened. "Oh, hold up there, Pikachu. You're not about to go all Frankenstein on me, are you? Because I gotta tell you, I'm more of a natural look kind of guy. Not really into the whole lightning bolt scar aesthetic." Nurse KZZ buzzed indignantly, sparks flying from their form in what could only be interpreted as offense. Dr. Zyx'norp sighed, a sound reminiscent of wind whistling through a particularly annoyed cavern. "The neural connector will realign your nervous system, allowing for proper reattachment and functionality of the limb." "Ooh, fancy," the human nodded appreciatively. "And here I was thinking you'd just slap some space duct tape on it and call it a day." As Nurse KZDZ began the delicate process of neural reconnection, the human continued their running commentary. This reminds me of the time I tried to rewire my own house. Didn't go so well. Ended up with the toaster connected to the shower. Made for some interesting breakfasts, let me tell you. The medical team exchanged bewildered glances, their various appendages and sensory organs conveying a universal message of, "Is this normal for a Deathworlder?" Meanwhile, Dr. Zyx'norp was closely monitoring the human's vital signs, his four eyes widening in disbelief. This is impossible. Your body is already beginning to heal itself. The cellular regeneration rate is off the charts. The human craned their neck to look at the holographic display of their vitals. Oh yeah, that old thing. It's just a little party trick we humans like to call not dying. We're pretty good at it, if I do say so myself. A gelatinous blob in the corner of the room suddenly quivered and reformed into the shape of Nurse Blorb. She took one look at the scene before her and promptly fainted again, this time with a resigned splat. Oh, come on, the human groaned. I haven't even told my best a guy walks into a bar joke yet. Talk about a tough crowd. As the reattachment process continued, Dr. Zyx'norp found himself torn between professional fascination and utter bafflement. He had studied Deathworlders extensively, of course. Their resilience was legendary throughout the galaxy. But to see it in action, to witness a being casually defy death with nothing more than bad jokes and an apparently indestructible will to live, was something else entirely. I must admit, Zyx'norp said, his voice a mixture of awe and confusion. I've never seen anything quite like this in all my years of practice. The human grinned. Well, Doc, consider this your intro to Humans 101. Lesson 1 were basically cockroaches with smartphones and a penchant for sarcasm. Just then, a loud beep emanated from one of the pulsating organ machines. Dr. Zyx'norp rushed over, his antennae practically tied in knots with worry. What is it, the human asked, trying to sit up and crane their neck to see. Did you guys find my long-lost sense of self-preservation in there? Because I've been looking for that for years. Dr. Zyx'norp's mandibles clicked rapidly as he studied the readout. It's your pain receptors. They're off the charts. You should be in excruciating agony right now. The human considered this for a moment. Is that what that is? I thought it was just Tuesday. The entire medical team stared at the human in stunned silence. Even Nurse Blorb, who had reformed once again, managed to maintain her shape, though she was visibly quivering. But how Zyx'norp sputtered. How are you enduring this level of pain? The human shrugged with their good shoulder. Hey, you know what they say. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Or in my case, what doesn't kill you probably just hasn't tried hard enough yet. As if on cue, the neural connector in Nurse K's tendril sparked violently, sending a jolt of electricity through the human's body. The medical team braced for screams of agony. Instead, they got, "Woo. That's better than my morning coffee. Hey, Sparkplug, think you could do that again? I've got this crick in my neck that's been bothering me for weeks." Dr. Zyx'norp's professional composure finally cracked. He threw all 6 of his arms up in exasperation. "That's it. I give up. You Deathworlders are impossible." The human grinned. Come on, Doc. Don't be like that. We're just getting to the good part. I haven't even told you about the time I wrestled a bear for the last slice of pizza. Nurse Blorb, who had been teetering on the edge of consciousness, finally lost her battle with gravity and melted into a puddle once more. "Oh, for the love of the Galactic core," Zyx'norp muttered. "Someone please reconstitute Nurse Blorb." Again. As the operation continued, the human regaled the increasingly bewildered medical team with tales of Deathworld exploits. Skydiving without a parachute, it was only once, and in my defense, I thought the squirrel suit would work better. Eating food so spicy it violated several intergalactic weapons treaties, just another Taco Tuesday, really. And surviving temperatures that would vaporize most known forms of life. Look, I told you Florida in August is no joke. By the time the arm was fully reattached, Dr. Zyx'norp had developed a nervous twitch in his left antenna. Nurse KZZT was permanently crackling with agitated energy, and the rest of the team was seriously considering a career change to something less stressful, like diffusing black holes or negotiating peace treaties between warring hive minds. "All right, folks," the human announced, sitting up and flexing their newly reattached arm. "This has been fun, but I've got places to be, death-defying stunts to perform. You know, the usual Tuesday stuff." Dr. Zyx'norp, clutching a datapad like a lifeline, managed to stammer out, "But you need to rest. Your body has undergone severe trauma. We need to monitor you for at least several solar cycles." The human was already hopping off the table, testing out their arm with a series of increasingly complex hand gestures, most of which seemed to be obscene in at least 12 different star systems. "Nah, I'm good. Besides, I've got a hot date with gravity later. Thinking about trying out this new sport called volcano surfing. Sounds relaxing, right?" The entire medical team let out a collective groan of despair. Nurse Blorb, who had just managed to pull herself together, promptly liquefied again. As the human sauntered towards the exit, they turned back with a grin that could only be described as alarmingly cheerful for someone who had nearly lost a limb. "Oh, and Doc, thanks for the tune-up. Put it on my tab, will ya? I'm good for it. Well, I will be once I win that bet about surviving a trip through a black hole. Later, Gators." And with that, the human was gone, leaving behind a room full of shell-shocked alien medical professionals in the lingering scent of singed hair and bad decisions. Dr. Zyx'norp slumped against the nearest pulsating organ machine, all four of his eyes glazed over in disbelief. I don't understand," he muttered. "How can a species so fragile be so insane?" offered Nurse KZZ, still crackling with residual stress. "Indestructible," suggested another nurse, who was busy trying to scrape the remains of Nurse Blorb off the floor. "Insufferable," Zyx'norp concluded, shaking his head. "Utterly, completely insufferable." As the team began the process of cleaning up and trying to make sense of what had just transpired, an alarm suddenly blared throughout the hospital. The intercom crackled to life. "Attention all staff. Code red in the cafeteria. A Deathworlder is attempting to consume the radioactive waste we use to power the building, claiming it looks like a spicy smoothie. All available personnel, please report to containment duty. And someone, for the love of all that's holy, get that human a menu." Dr. Zyx'norp's antennae drooped in resignation. Right, he sighed, pulling himself together. "Who wants to bet it's our one-armed wonder?" The resulting silence was all the answer he needed. As they trudged towards the cafeteria, bracing themselves for whatever fresh chaos awaited them, Dr. Zyx'norp couldn't help but mutter under his breath, "I should have listened to my spawning pod and become a simple algae farmer, but knew I had to go and be ambitious. See the galaxy," they said. "Meet fascinating new species." They said. They never mentioned anything about suicidal apes with a death wish and a bad sense of humor. The scene that greeted them in the cafeteria was, somehow, even more chaotic than they had imagined. The human, yes, the very same one they had just reattached an arm to, was standing atop a table, holding a glowing canister of what was unmistakably radioactive waste. A crowd of alien patrons had formed a wide circle around them, a mixture of horror and morbid fascination on their various facial appendages. "Come on, you wimps," the human was shouting, waving the canister around like a trophy. "This is nothing. Back on Earth, we drink stuff way worse than this on a regular basis. Ever heard of energy drinks? Now that's some real toxic sludge." Dr. Zyx'norp pushed his way to the front of the crowd, all six of his arms raised in what he hoped was a calming gesture. "Now, let's all just take a deep breath and—" "Doc," the human exclaimed, beaming down at him. "Just in time. I was telling these fine folks about human cuisine. Did you know we regularly consume a substance called coffee that's basically liquid insanity? It's great stuff." Zyx'norp's left antenna twitched violently. "That's fascinating," he managed through gritted mandibles. "But perhaps we could discuss human dietary habits without the deadly radioactive material." The human looked at the canister in their hand as if they'd forgotten they were holding it. "Oh, this old thing? PFFT. It's fine. Probably. I mean, what's the worst that could happen? I grow an extra arm, because let me tell you, that would be super convenient. Do you know how hard it is to play a triple neck guitar with only two arms?" A collective gasp went through the crowd. Even Dr. Zyx'norp, who thought he was beyond surprise at this point, felt his exoskeleton crawl. You want to grow another limb? Voluntarily?" The human shrugged. "Sure, why not? I mean, you guys did such a great job with the reattachment, I figured I'd give you a chance to really show off your skills. Plus, think of the possibilities. I could juggle chainsaws and pet a dog at the same time. That's efficiency right there." Dr. Zyx'norp felt a headache building in all four of his brains. He made a mental note to research whether it was possible for a Zentarian to spontaneously molt out of sheer stress. "Please, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. Just put down the radioactive material. We can discuss alternative methods of limb acquisition that don't involve, potentially melting your entire genetic structure. The human pondered this for a moment, absently swirling the glowing contents of the canister. Hashim, I don't know. Melting my genetic structure sounds kind of fun. It's like a spa day, but for your DNA, right? A horrified murmur rippled through the crowd. Nurse Blorb, who had finally managed to maintain her form long enough to reach the cafeteria, promptly melted again with a resigned glorp. Oh, come on, the human exclaimed, noticing the puddle that was once Nurse Blorb. I'm starting to think she's doing this on purpose. Is this some kind of alien party trick? Because if so, it's pretty impressive. Disgusting, but impressive. Dr. Zyx'norp decided it was time to change tactics. Look, he said, trying to appeal to whatever passed for reason in a human's mind, if you put down that canister right now, I'll tell you about some of the most dangerous medical procedures we've developed for Deathworlders. How does that sound? The human's eyes lit up with an enthusiasm that sent chills down Zyx'norp's spinal ridges. Ooh, now we're talking. Do any of them involve explosions? Please tell me there are explosions. No explosions, Zyx'norp said quickly, then reconsidered. Well, maybe small ones, in very controlled circumstances. The human carefully set down the radioactive canister and hopped off the table, much to the relief of everyone present. So, Doc, tell me about these procedures, and don't skimp on the gory details. As Dr. Zyx'norp led the human away from the cafeteria, he began to explain some of the more unique medical treatments they had developed for species from high-gravity, high-radiation environments. The human listened with rapt attention, occasionally interjecting with comments like, "Oh, that's nothing. I once superglued a gash closed while riding a motorcycle through a tornado," or "PS, bone-melting acid. We call that extra spicy sauce where I come from." Meanwhile, the rest of the medical staff was left to deal with the aftermath. Nurse KZZ, still crackling with nervous energy, carefully contained the radioactive material, muttering something about retirement and nice, quiet black hole to live in. The arachnoid nurse was tasked with once again reconstituting Nurse Blorb, a process that was becoming distressingly routine. As they walked through the winding corridors of the hospital, Dr. Zyx'norp couldn't help but marvel at the paradox walking beside him. Here was a being so physically fragile compared to many species in the galaxy, yet possessed of a resilience and disregard for personal safety that bordered on the miraculous, or the insane. Possibly both. So the human said, interrupting Zyx'norp's thoughts about that arm reattachment. Gotta say, you guys did a bang-up job. Barely even noticed the seam. But I was thinking. Zyx'norp's antennae drooped. He had a feeling he wasn't going to like what came next. What if, and hear me out here, what if we did some upgrades while we're at it? Nothing too fancy. Just some retractable claws, maybe a built-in Swiss Army knife. Ooh, or a flamethrower. Every arm needs a good flamethrower, right? The doctor stopped in his tracks, all four eyes blinking rapidly as he tried to process this request. You want to turn your newly reattached limb into a weapon? The human grinned. Well, when you put it like that, it sounds crazy. I prefer to think of it as tactical limb enhancement. Come on, Doc, where's your sense of adventure? I believe I left it back in medical school, along with my will to live, Zyx'norp muttered under his breath. What was that? Nothing. Look, perhaps we should focus on your recovery first. You've just undergone a major surgical procedure. Your body needs time to heal and adjust. The human waved their reattached arm dismissively, nearly knocking over a passing nurse who looked like a sentient crystal formation. PFF, healing is for wimps. I feel great. In fact, I bet I could arm wrestle a Croxian battle beast right now. You guys got any of those around here? Zyx'norp felt his left eye beginning to twitch. No, we do not keep highly dangerous predators in a medical facility, and even if we did, I would not allow you to engage in combat with 1 mere hours after major surgery. Spoil sport, the human pouted. Fine, how about something a little tamer? Any anti-gravity chambers around here? I've always wanted to try breakdancing in 0G. Before Zyx'norp could formulate a response that didn't involve screaming incoherently, an alarm blared through the hospital corridors. A holographic display flickered to life in front of them, showing what appeared to be a massive, tentacled creature rampaging through the hospital's lower levels. Oh, Zyx'norp muttered. It seems the hyper-squid from Nexus 9 has escaped containment again. This is bad. Very, very bad. He expected the human to show some sign of concern, fear, or at least a basic sense of self-preservation. What he got instead was a wide grin and eyes sparkling with excitement. A hyper squid? That sounds awesome. Is it like a regular squid but, hyper? Can it shoot lasers from its tentacles? Oh man, please tell me it can shoot lasers. Zyx'norp felt a deep, cosmic weariness settle into his bones. No, it cannot shoot lasers. It can, however, compress and expand space-time in its immediate vicinity, create localized gravity wells, and it has a rather nasty habit of turning anything it touches inside out. The human's grin, impossibly, grew even wider. Oh, this just keeps getting better and better. Come on, Doc, let's go check it out. Before Zyx'norp could protest, the human was already sprinting down the corridor towards the sounds of chaos and destruction. The doctor briefly considered locking himself in a supply closet and pretending none of this was happening. But no, he had taken an oath to preserve life and promote health across the galaxy, even if that life seemed hell-bent on throwing itself into the tentacles of danger at every opportunity. With a resigned sigh, Zyx'norp set off after the human, his many limbs working overtime to keep up with the Deathworlder's reckless pace. As they descended into the lower levels of the hospital, the sounds of panic and destruction grew louder. They rounded a corner to find a scene of utter chaos. The hyper squid, a writhing mass of iridescent tentacles each the size of a small spacecraft, was throwing medical equipment and terrified staff members around with reckless abandon. Spatial distortions rippled through the air, causing light to bend and twist in nauseating patterns. And there, in the middle of it all, stood the human, hands on hips, looking for all the world like they were about to attempt to reason with the cosmic horror before them. "Hey there, big guy," the human called out, waving their newly reattached arm at the creature. "Having a bit of a tantrum, are we? Did someone forget to give you your space calamari treats this morning?" The hyper squid paused its rampage, countless eyes swiveling to focus on the tiny being addressing it. There was a moment of perfect stillness, like the calm before a supernova. Then, faster than Zyx'norp's many eyes could follow, a tentacle lashed out towards the human. The doctor's hearts, all 7 of them, leapt into his throat. This was it. The end of the strange, reckless, utterly baffling Deathworlder. He braced himself for the sight of a human turned inside out. But the sight never came. Instead, he watched in slack-jawed amazement as the human sidestepped the tentacle with a grace that seemed impossible for such a stocky species. Not only that, but they grabbed onto the appendage as it whipped past, using its momentum to launch themselves towards the hyper squid's central mass. "Yeehaw," the human shouted, riding the thrashing tentacle like some sort of demented space cowboy. "Now this is what I call a rodeo. Hey Doc, you gotta try this." Zyx'norp, who had taken cover behind an overturned gurney, could only watch in horrified fascination as the human began to. Was he seeing this right? Yes, the crazy Deathworlder was attempting to tie the hyper squid's tentacles into knots. "Come on, you overgrown calamari," the human taunted, narrowly avoiding being turned inside out by a fraction of a second. "Is that all you've got? I've had more exciting games of Twister." The hyper squid, for its part, seemed as confused by this turn of events as everyone else. Its rampage slowed, its many eyes blinking in what could only be described as bewilderment. It was almost as if the cosmic horror was thinking, "This isn't how it's supposed to go. Small creatures are meant to flee in terror, not treat me like some sort of intergalactic amusement park ride." As the human continued their death-defying acrobatics, Zyx'norp noticed something strange. The spatial distortions around the hyper squid were beginning to stabilize. The creature's frantic movements were slowing, its color shifting from an angry red to a more subdued blue. Could it be? Was this reckless, impossible human actually calming the hyper squid? "That's right, you big softy," the human was saying, now perched atop the creature's central mass and patting it like one might pet a particularly large and dangerous dog. "You're not so bad, are you? You just needed someone to play with, didn't you?" "Yes, you did. Yes, you did. Yes." The hyper squid let out a sound that could only be described as a contented gurgle. Its tentacles, no longer lashing out in destruction, curled around the human in what looked disturbingly like an affectionate embrace. Zyx'norp cautiously emerged from his hiding spot, mandibles clicking in disbelief. This is unprecedented," he muttered. "In all our years of studying the hyper squid, we've never seen it respond like this to any stimulus." The human beamed down at him from their perch atop the now docile cosmic horror. "Aw, you just gotta know how to talk to him. This big fella's just a big softy underneath all the space-time warping and inside-out turning stuff. Aren't you, you big lug? They gave the hyper squid an affectionate noogie, causing it to emit another happy gurgle. As the rest of the medical staff cautiously emerged from various hiding spots, Zyx'norp found himself reevaluating everything he thought he knew about Deathworlders, humans in particular. Here was a being that, by all rights, should have been atomized, inverted, and scattered across 6 dimensions by now. Instead, they were treating an eldritch abomination from the depths of space like an oversized puppy. So Doc, Masai, the human called down, still casually lounging atop the hyper squid, about those arm upgrades we were discussing earlier. I'm thinking we might need to think bigger. How do you feel about tentacles? Because I gotta say, these things are pretty handy. Ooh. Or maybe some of that space-time warping stuff. Now that would really spice up my juggling act. Zyx'norp felt his left antenna begin to twitch again. He made a mental note to schedule an appointment with the hospital's therapist, and possibly to start looking into early retirement options. Somewhere nice and quiet. Perhaps a nice, peaceful black hole. As the human continued to rattle off increasingly outlandish ideas for bodily upgrades, occasionally pausing to kee-oo at the hyper squid, Zyx'norp couldn't help but chuckle. It was a laugh of disbelief, of resignation, and perhaps a touch of hysteria. Because in that moment, watching a one-armed human snuggle with a creature that could bend the very fabric of reality, Dr. Zyx'norp finally understood the true meaning of the term Deathworlder. It wasn't just about surviving harsh environments or possessing extraordinary physical resilience. No, being a Deathworlder was a state of mind. It was about facing the impossible with a grin and a bad joke. It was about turning mortal peril into an extreme sport. It was about looking at the most terrifying entities the universe had to offer and thinking, I bet that would make a cool pet. And as he watched the human attempt to teach the hyper squid how to play patty cake with its tentacles, Dr. Zyx'norp realized something else. The galaxy would never be the same now that humans had joined the intergalactic community. It would be more chaotic, certainly, more dangerous, probably. But it would also be more interesting. And maybe, just maybe, that made it all worthwhile. Even if it meant he'd need to stock up on headache remedies and possibly invest in some sort of indestructible protective gear. As if reading his thoughts, the human called out, Hey Doc, once we're done here, how about we grab a drink? I've got this great recipe for a cocktail I call the Supernova Slammer, fair warning. It might make you see through time, but trust me, it's worth it. Zyx'norp sighed, but found himself nodding. After all, what was the worst that could happen? On second thought, he decided it was probably best not to answer that question. With humans around, the possibilities were truly infinite. And so as the hyper squid contentedly played with its new human friend, and the medical staff cautiously began to restore order to the chaos, Dr. Zyx'norp realized that his life, and indeed the entire galaxy, had just gotten a whole lot more interesting.